It's time to take a ride on the Steelers Afternoon Drive with our co-hosts Alan Saunders and Zachary Smith.
Welcome into another Steelers Afternoon Drive. I'm Zachary Smith. That is Alan Saunders. Alan, how we doing?
I'm good, Smitty. How are you?
Doing all right. I'm doing better than right now as we sit in this present moment. I would say Grady Brown is doing. I'm sure he's going to land somewhere, but he will not be back with the Pittsburgh Steelers. We were just talking about this. Let's just jump right into it. Gerald Alexander coming into the organization as the DB coach. We were wondering, what does that mean for the future of Grady Brown? Turns out his contract did expire. They were not renewing it. He's already been removed from the coaching staff page on the Steelers website, so won't be back. What do we make of this move? Does it surprise you to any degree? Grady was interviewing. Was it just one interview that he had for a DC job in Atlanta?
Oh.
So there was that, and maybe people had a bigger idea of the quality of coach that we're talking about here. What do you make of this? What do you think of Grady Brown as a coach? Is this a big loss? Did you expect this? Where are we at?
Well, I think like a coordinator interview doesn't mean anything really. Like Mike Sullivan got some last year, right? Like it just doesn't it doesn't really mean anything.
Was that just last year?
Yeah, it was. And so I don't put any stock into that. I do think Grady Brown is generally seen as like an up and coming kind of coach. He was a coordinator at the Senior Bowl last year, I want to say. Either last year or the year before. He was a coordinator at the Senior Bowl. Like that, those are the kind of things where you're like, okay, this guy's someone that the NFL is seeing as, a potentially rising coach. And so I think in some ways that makes him not staying surprising. I also think you look at the Steelers secondary in 2024 and it's hard to call it well coached, right? Like there was lots of miscommunications, missed assignments, alignment issues, guys running. I mean, what was the direct quote? Like wide ass open. Like, I mean, it was just, it was a mess. And
got worse as the season went on.
I think Grady Brown's a good coach. I think Gerald Alexander's a good coach. This kind of, to me, feels like a move for the sake of making a move. But given the issues down the stretch, I don't like it's crazy to just not do anything. And I think this is a reasonable thing to do. I don't think the Steelers have bad coaches. I don't think there's a coach on the Steelers coaching staff where you look at and you're just like, this guy doesn't belong on an NFL coaching staff. If the Steelers fired him and never get another job, he doesn't fit here. Like, I don't think they have bad coaches. I just think things weren't working. And so sometimes you make some changes that you can make just to make some changes. And I kind of feel like that's what this is.
So I know that you mentioned before we started recording that you don't necessarily get why there are people that are, up in arms about losing him. But so what I'll say to that is I'm not about this one specific move, like this 1-for-1 swap that we're talking about here. But I think for me, at least, where the frustration comes from is just the process and that always being the case. Like it's always 1-for-1 swaps as opposed to just in addition to the staff, along with Grady staying like that. That's what I would have been
hire Gerald Alexander, bring him back to the staff because I really like him as a coach. He brings a lot of energy, a different personality than I think Grady has. And so if you're looking to make a change, you could like some of that. But also you could have just made Grady Brown defensive passing game coordinator and kept Gerald Alexander and brought in Gerald Alexander as DB's coach. And had a bigger staff. I think the size of the staff is a real problem. I think the Steelers seriously have their head in the sand about recognizing that as a problem. And also, I think it's pretty clear that the budget for the coaching staff is a problem as well. I don't think it's any coincidence that the only coaches that have left from this offseason have been coaches whose contracts were up. In fact, outside of a half a season of Matt Canada, when they did not even replace him with someone from outside the staff, they just gave people they were already paying additional responsibility. I can't even remember the last time the Steelers paid a coach to not coach. It almost feels like if you're a coach and you coach for the Pittsburgh Steelers and you have a 2-year contract, it does not matter how poorly you do over those 2 years. You are coaching out that contract. Like they just do not do it. And I think those two, like if you want to be frustrated with the process, the refusal to ever expand the coaching staff, and they have done a little bit, but the refusal to significantly expand the coaching staff to a level that feels equivalent to other NFL teams, and this idea that they just never will move on from a coach. And like, I don't think Pat Meyer's a bad offensive line coach. I don't even really understand why he has sort of, for some reason, become the focal point of the fan base as like the one guy they want fired. I don't really get it. Like, I mean, whatever. But it was just clear that they were not even going to consider really firing him while he was under contract. And like, whether or not he deserved to be fired this offseason, that's a bad process. Like if that's the process you're making to determine who is staying and who is going from your coaching staff, that's what it should be.
Yeah, well, that's if you didn't add that, that's what I was going to say. The other part of my frustration, not with this move specifically, but again, just with the process and this being a continuation of it. Let's go to the Pat Meyer thing, though, because he is staying. Mike DeFabo, the Athletic, first one to put that out there, I believe. So I want to give him credit for doing so, that he'll be back on the staff. You kind of gave some thoughts there. What I will say is this was one of those ones I didn't really necessarily care what direction they went in. I was probably leaning towards them moving on just because, again, like if there was going to be some turnover within the coaching staff, I figured that would be also a place to look at. But the other part of that where I can talk myself into it is I kind of want, like, I'm not saying that he needed to be the guy, but we've kind of already started this process with so many different new young offensive linemen. I'm not saying he needs to oversee it the entire time if it starts to go south, but like with missing the entire season last year with Troy Fautanu, I think he deserves a shot at least this year to see what that group is going to look like.
Yeah, and I think like he coaches a very unique style, and I'm not even sure that unique style is the right one for the Steelers right now, which is an argument like against keeping him. But on the other hand, it's one of those continuity things where like sometimes I think you can do some harm even if the new coach is a quote unquote better coach, just by making guys. When you talk about 4 young offensive linemen now unlearning and relearning in their first and second NFL off seasons, I don't know how good that is for them either. I don't think this is a Matt Canada situation where it's like, hey, this guy is clearly just not cut out for this job at this level. Like Pat Meyer's an NFL offensive line coach. He's been a good one, not a great one, but a good one for a while now. Like it's not like they have this like flashing, glaring weakness. You know what I mean? And the other thing I'll say about this too is it makes some sense to me that the changes are coming to the defensive coaching staff. Because I think we've talked a lot. Like I know the Steelers offense wasn't very good, but the Steelers offensive personnel is bad, frankly. The Steelers defense personnel, elite. Results, good, maybe you could say great, but certainly not elite like the personnel. So like if you're going to make changes just for the sake of making changes, I think the defensive side of the ball does make sense to kind of target.
Yeah. No, that's fair. Like, we talked about the fact that there was one point this season, not that long ago, where they were like 10th, 11th in scoring. And we talked about how much of an overachievement that was. Still finishing 16th. That's above where I would have said. I think I said if they finished somewhere between 18 to 20 is kind of where I thought they'd be. So
yeah, they were 28th last year. So like this staff, you made a very nice improvement year over year. Like I understand it's not where anybody wants them to be, but I think looking at the offense kind of from a realistic standpoint, how much can the coaches do compared to what they have to work with? I think the offensive coaching staff was in a lot better place this year than the defensive coaching staff. And that's why I'm kind of on board with this idea. I think Grady Brown will land on his feet. I think he's a good coach. But I'm okay with the idea of making some changes just to change things up with that defense because they're too good to play the way they did, especially in the playoffs against the Ravens.
Yeah, absolutely. Alan, you mentioned yesterday, we've talked about what the going price would be for Deebo Samuel in a trade. Apparently, when you said the pick that would probably be going back the other way, that didn't matter but then ESPN puts it out, and everybody's now on board with basically the same value being attached to Deebo Samuel in a trade. So day 3 pick is what's being talked about. Would there be something else attached to that, another day 3 pick or something like that, whether it be in that same year or the following year? I don't know, but that's essentially what we're talking about, is a day 3 pick for Deebo Samuel. Anything more to add than what we've already talked about in terms of the context of this? Because
no,
again,
I just think it's really funny that like all the people on Twitter hated this deal when I put it out there first yesterday, but now that it was out there because ESPN said it's only going to be a day 3 pick, everyone's like, "Oh, we'll do it. Why haven't they done it already?"
Yeah, well, that's why I brought up to you. I was like, "See, this is why you got." And I'm not like sure how exactly we were wording when talked about yesterday. I know we threw out a couple different scenarios, but it's like if you say day 3 as opposed to round 4. Because then people have in their head it could be, a 5th round pick, 6th round pick, even 7th round pick, as opposed to the round 4, which is probably, I would say, more likely than anything else. Then people have in their idea, that's much lower value than a 4th round pick.
But then when they actually trade him for a 4th, are they going to be upset or are they going to be happy?
Well, no, once it's because then that's a whole separate thing. Once the move is done, a lot of people just talk themselves into it anyway. So like,
that's true. The one thing I thought was notable was, and I want to get the guy's name because it did good work. The 49ers beat reporter, Nick Wagoner from ESPN. And it was it's seriously, I mean, we linked to it in the story at SteelersNow.com, but it's pretty in-depth stuff and about, why the 49ers are seemingly ready to move on from Deebo Samuel and vice versa. But the one thing he brought up in there was potentially like a pick swap. Where like because and the one thing I had mentioned yesterday when I brought up the idea of like what if they sent George Pickens back like the 49ers had been asking for last year, maybe it's like a Deebo in a 6th for a 4th, something like that, where like to me I think that because we had talked the 49ers have I think they have like 10 draft picks, like they don't need another day 3 pick next year. That is something that I think I could really get on
that's
board.
very palatable. Yeah, because then even if you're still trading George Pickens, then you have him to use in a separate trade, even getting more draft capital.
Or again, keep it one way or the other.
Let me ask you this actually while we're on the topic of George Pickens, because I just had this conversation with our guy Jeff Hartman, and I brought up I see this going 2 different avenues, but like maybe you're still because with what you just said about keeping him, that to me has been like the least likely thing because I don't think he's getting money this summer. And I think if he doesn't get an extension, I could see him and his agent forcing his way out, or the Steelers getting ahead of that by trading him before you even get to that point.
Yeah, so you kind of have to like judge 2 things here, right? Like, I agree with you. I don't think there's almost any way that the Steelers are going to sign George Pickens to a contract extension. Not only do I think it would be a bad idea, that's what I'm hearing from people around the organization as well. Okay, so I don't think that's very likely. Second part of this is, what is George's reaction going to be to that? And we've seen very different approaches, right? Like you saw what Ayuk did last year. You saw Najee Harris in Pittsburgh, kind of the polar opposite, right? Just showed up day 1, was like, I'm here. Let's go to work. I'm going to hit people in training camp. They're going to hit me. It's fine. Let's go do it. Not only I have no idea how to predict that. Like I have no idea how to handicap what that might be. And then the second part of this is it almost doesn't matter what his reaction actually would be if the Steelers are convinced that it would be bad. Then they won't even get to that point where they're letting his reaction make the decision for them. They'll just do what they did to Deontay Johnson last year and preemptively trade him, right? Like, so it's like 2 things, right? Like part of it is like, how is George going to react to the idea that he's not going to get a contract extension? And how do the Steelers think George might react to that? Because if their thought process is, if we tell this guy he's not going to get a contract, he's going to go nuclear and we're never going to be able to control the situation again after that, they might just trade him without ever even broaching the subject. So yeah, that's possible too. But I really have no idea how to.
Yeah, no, that's why like
of how that might go down. I think
for me,
it's possible that George is a Steeler next year and plays out the last year of his contract like Najee did this year. I still think that's possible, but I don't really know how to put kind of a percentage to it.
Yeah, no, that's fair. I don't know. Like I just see, like I said, I think that's not happening. The extension's not happening.
Yeah,
And
I
I
agree
just think
with that.
regardless of what path we go, like I have very little faith in him willing to play out the last year of his contract on the Steelers. That's just where I'm at with it personally. But people can agree, disagree, whatever. But regardless, Deebo Samuel, George Pickens, whoever's going to round out the receiver room, still knows who's going to be throwing him the ball. And it sounds like if it's Aaron Rodgers, DeShon Elliott might just retire from football. One off the team. Maybe he requests a trade. Who knows? That's so funny to me that like I thought it was a Photoshop comment.
Dude, I was like in our group text, like this can't be real.
Yeah. So you sent it, and I was like searching for it. I'm like checking every Instagram page that I thought could have posted it. Blah blah blah. So JPA Football put that Aaron Rodgers, obviously we know not going to be back with the Jets. Pittsburgh Steelers at the top of the list in terms of his next team. DeShon Elliott comments, "Leave his ass at the retirement home." So I would say pretty candidly does not want him.
I love DeShon Elliott. He's a guy that like he should have been a Steeler from day one. I don't know how they messed that up. Wish we could go back in time and fix it. But what a character. I think there's DeShon has said some stuff. Wasn't there like a Mike Tomlin as Osama bin Laden?
Yep.
Like, Photoshop, edit, whatever you want to call it.
That did happen.
DeShon's been known to say some things. I don't know that it matters that like I don't think the Steelers are looking at this and be like, well, man, what are we gonna do? We were just all about to sign to Aaron Rodgers and now we can't. I don't think it matters in that way, but I think it's funny to hear the sort of unfiltered opinion of the locker room. I've heard other players express similar sentiments about the idea of bringing in Aaron Rodgers. And also, I think it's interesting that Bill Cowher was on the Dan Patrick show yesterday, and he said that maybe the Steelers would go to the Aaron Rodgers route because, hey, Cam Hayward, TJ Watt, these guys aren't getting any younger. They kind of got to push their chips in now and try to win what they can. And the sentiment I'm getting from the locker room is not just coming from people Deshaun Watson's age, is that is not something that they would be necessarily way behind like they were Russell Wilson a year ago.
Yeah. I really don't. It's interesting because I wasn't taking into consideration how players on the team would feel about it because I think I said this on here. Like if it wasn't going to be one of the quarterbacks that were on the roster last year, I actually felt like Aaron Rodgers was quite plausible. Like if you were going to tell me,
I think he might be the third most plausible option. Like what would be like Daniel Jones? I don't know. Like that's like Derek Carr maybe if he gets cut like that. Kirk Cousins, I guess, might be available. I don't know. Like that. You're really grasping at straws at that point.
Mm-hmm. And hey,
Jackson
at least
Dart, should we?
Oh, brother,
should we go there next? Finish with Aaron Rodgers first, then we'll get to Jackson Dart.
Yeah, I was just thinking about it. Like I wasn't taking into consideration how the players or anybody might feel about it, but I was like, not Fields, not Russ. Aaron obviously going to be out with the Jets. We know that him and Tomlin have talked very highly about each other in the past. He at least maybe he gives you the option, package deal with Devontae Adams, perhaps. So maybe there's something to be said about that. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know what to make of this. I don't know how many other players feel the same way.
The thing about Aaron too is that he would not be like the Russ deal where you're getting him from nothing. If the Jets cut him, he doesn't have any guaranteed money coming his way. So, I don't know what he would want, but the Steelers would have to pay him. Like, it would not be the same as Russ. Now, Kirk Cousins, I haven't checked Derek Carr's contract situation, but Kirk Cousins would be the same, where the Steelers would, if the Falcons cut him, and I'm not sold on the Falcons cutting him. I think they're going to keep him if they can't trade him. But if the Falcons cut Kirk Cousins, then the Steelers would be able to get him, or whoever would be able to get him for the minimum, and the Falcons would be paying a salary, just like Denver did with Russ this year.
Yeah. So DeShon Elliott does not want to see Aaron Rodgers at quarterback. I do not want to see Jackson Dart at quarterback. And I want your thoughts on him because I feel like all of a sudden he's like getting a ton of buzz, was put in the first round of Field Yates mock draft to the Steelers. Like I really can't get on board with him there for sure. And this comes on the heels of seeing Quinshon Judkins in round one. Like, what are we doing with these mock drafts to the Steelers? Like, is the whole purpose rage bait for me personally. But yeah, Jackson Dart 21 to the Steelers. Cannot get on board with it. Don't think I'd be on board in the second round. Third, fourth round, it starts to be a little bit more appealing, but I've watched so much of Jackson Dart, and I don't see whatever a lot of people are seeing that are putting him in, giving him day one grades.
I don't get it, man. I mean, this guy was a college quarterback for a long time. Had his best year as a senior, no question about that, but played in a gimmicky offense. Not an elite athlete, not elite arm strength. He's gotten more accurate, but like he didn't look very accurate at the Senior Bowl. Like that's the other part is this. Like I was there, man. Like I don't know. People keep saying he was good. I did not think he was good. I thought he was the least bad. And
yeah, that's probably a better way to put it.
That's like not what you want to see. Like look, be good or bad at the Senior Bowl is not like the be all and end all, but like just one more thing in the pile, right? Like I don't know. I don't really see it. I don't know. I don't. I guess he's experienced, but like you said, like it's this gimmicky offense that, like, even though he's played, I don't know, 45 college games, I don't really have any idea if he can read a defense or not. And
it's not like he's like it was lighting it up within that offense, despite it being gimmicky. Like it's so
he had like 4,500 yards this year. Like it was a good season. 4,279. Sorry, but like, yeah, I don't know. I don't really see it, to be honest. I don't like. I would take him in the third round, and honestly, not sure I would feel great about it. But
I was just I would say fourth is like where I start to be okay with it. Third, if it's a third, I'm again going back to the Deebo trade thing. Regardless of how people feel about it, once it's done, you start to talk yourself into. So if the Steelers took him in the third, I'd talk myself into it. But
yeah, I would want to, like, depends on who else is there. Like, there's lots of good players available in the third round. I think in Jackson Dart, you're getting like at best, like kind of bottom tier starter. Like my comp has been Matt Schaub, where it's like, sure, you could start him, but like, I don't know what, like,
former Pro Bowl.
And
yeah, so like where are you drafting that? Like if you know that that's the result.
Right. I don't really Matt Schaub was 6'6", so like maybe not perfect. Honestly, Mason Rudolph is not a bad comp either, where you have the guy with this like gimmicky college offense, put up some numbers, but there's like a lot of question marks. Too decent size, like kind of looks the part, maybe more than like plays the part. Yeah, I don't know. I just like that's not someone the idea of him as a first, like Jalen Milroe. If you want to talk about Jalen Milroe sneaking into the first round, it's because this guy has the kind of athleticism and physical traits that Madden won't let you make on a creative player because it's unfair. And so, like, I can see some team falling in love with that and him going up the board as a result. Who is going to fall in love with Jackson Dart? Like, that's the thing I just don't see happening.
Yeah, and it's speaking of Milroe, like every team is going to convince themselves that they are the team that can get that out of him too. So yeah, interesting stuff. We'll see how that plays out. Obviously, want to get to some questions here. I know I said it's a big Thomas Brocious day, so we definitely got to get to him. But Justin gave us a super chat, so obviously got to get to this. $2 from Justin here. Big fan of the show. Went back and forth with that one on Twitter a few days ago. Agreed it's a good thing to move in this run dominant direction. I was trying to emphasize how important those two wide receivers are to everything the Eagles do, from being able to run versus lighter boxes, ability to convert third and longs within attempting to play ball control. Ball control helps the defense stay fresh and healthy. If they strike out again at receiver, a vet man guy can't be a fallback at the Z, or 2025 is Groundhog Day, regardless of what they do with the defense. Balance is what allows the Eagles to play winning football.
Yeah, I mean, it took the Eagles like 15 years to build what they've got on offense. Like, the Steelers are in year 3 of this project. Like, and the wide receivers are not going to be the first thing. They're probably not going to be the second thing either. It's probably going to be offensive line, quarterback. Yeah, I mean, you can invest in the wide receiver position, and I expect the Steelers too. But like compared to the other stuff, it kind of doesn't matter that much. And like the other thing is like, yeah, the Eagles have really good receivers. They have AJ Brown as a game changer. Devonta Smith might be the best wide receiver 2 in the league. Even Jahan Dotson, like former first round pick, like as a wide receiver 3, that's a very good player. And so I think the Eagles have really good wide receivers. There's no question that the talent at wide receiver is a big part of what they're doing. It's just sort of the last part, right? And like they've had years where, and like Saquon Barkley was obviously kind of like the last thing, but like they were a really good team with Miles Sanders and Swift and like, you know, yeah, Barkley got them to be a Super Bowl team, but they were already, well, they went to the Super Bowl with I think Garrett Blunt was their lead rusher that year.
Jay Ajayi, yep.
Yeah. Like so, like if you have
that's before the AJ Brown trade happened in 22.
Yeah,
so like
if you have the line, the other stuff is sort of secondary, and you can fit the pieces and make it work. And obviously they've got a really good group right now. But yeah, I mean, I think wide receiver, the Steelers absolutely needed to address the wide receiver position last year. They failed. That was a failure. And if they go into this offseason with George Pickens, Calvin Austin, and Roman Wilson, that's a failure too. But it's not like they like have to use their first round pick level of necessity, I think, at this point either. Like they just need better players.
While you were talking there, and I'm not saying like the Steelers don't do this, I'd kind of have to go back and go through. I know everybody complains about them certainly not doing this at the quarterback position, but like having the replacement already in place, like the Philly's really good at doing that. Obviously, they did it with having Cam Jurgens in place to be ready to go when Kelsey retired, but had Landon Dickerson brought in as well the previous season from Jurgens to be ready to go. Obviously, they lost Isaac Seumalo. Like they just replenishment within that offensive line group as well, and they've done the same thing on the defensive line, just seeming to draft guy after guy after guy. It's just a factory.
Yeah, and I think that's why you're going to see 3 more trenches players drafted this year, probably. Like you're going to get, I think, 2 defensive linemen and another offensive lineman would not surprise me in the least.
Yeah. Okay, so let's get some Thomas Brocious stuff now. It's a Thomas Tuesday here. We keep talking about the Steelers following the Eagles blueprint because they have the best GM in football. There's one variable that I think might be getting overlooked. The Eagles traded Carson Wentz to Colts in 2021, which led to the Eagles getting following players: Devonta Smith, AJ Brown, Jalen Carter. I don't think that this contradicts the Eagles' method, but it does add some nuance, doesn't it? Chase Claypooling the Bears somewhat resembles Carson Wentzing the Colts on a smaller scale, but do you think the Eagles' method requires more fleecing for other teams to pull off? First off, I really just appreciate the Chase Claypooling and the Carson Wentzing. Those terms being used.
Yeah. I mean, certainly the Wentz trade went well for the Eagles. There's no question about that. I don't think it's. I think Howie's ability to accumulate draft picks, both with compensatory picks and trading players for picks, has and trading around the draft board so many times. They get the player they wanted and they get an extra pick because they move back. And the Steelers have started to do that under Omar Sum. But I think there's, like the ability, like it's one of the reasons I could really see them trading George Pickens is that like the thought process there is pretty valid. That like you got to know who your guys are, who aren't. Like knowing who aren't your guys is just as important as knowing who are your guys. And if you can move on from people, net draft picks, and you don't need to like tear it all down. Like the Eagles were never awful in there. They just added a couple extra picks and continue to get better.
He talks about too here, the Lions and Rams being beneficiaries of a botched QB situation. Rams sold their future to win a Super Bowl, which they did. The Lions sold out their mediocre situation, capitalized on the Rams' future. 2 of the best teams in the NFL now, 3 if you include the Texans, who have been built up by fleecing other teams. Maybe we could trade Pickens and Minka to create a future value. What do we make of that?
I can't get on board with them trading Minka. I don't think they'd get good value for him for one. Not anything approaching what they would need to make that kind of trade. And then the second thing
which is what in your mind? Like, what would be the price that they would need to get?
Like a first round pick.
Yeah. Okay.
And
well, sure.
Yeah. Like I could not trade Minkah for less than that. I just think he's too good. I understand he didn't have a good year, but like you're selling low for no reason. You don't have another player behind him, as you're talking about. Like it's one thing if you feel like there's someone pushing them out of the way, right? Like they don't have anybody. They don't even have a young free. They don't have another free safety signed to a contract. I don't think. KZ's a free agent. Ryan Watts is a strong safety. Killebrews is only a safety because they got to put something there.
Right. Like if they would have had drafted Brian Branch, started out playing him in like the nickel or something like that.
Now, I think this is a year where they should draft the safety. And if they draft the safety, and at the end of his first year, he looks like he's a promising player. Like, let's say that instead of re-signing KZ, they draft the safety in the 7th round. I'll give you a name. Aubrey Burks from West Virginia. I really like him. Really good player. Okay. Let's say they draft Aubrey Burks. He comes in. He's really good. Plays some special teams. Plays that third safety role. And you're like, all right, we think he can do more. Okay, now maybe you sold me. But like right now, you're going to make your defense a lot worse with that trade. And the draft capital is not going to add up to the equivalent. Like you're not going to be able to get what you're losing back with the draft capital you're going to get for trading Minkah.
Sure. Yeah, I think it's even like Thomas is even saying, like, understanding you're probably taking a step back there to hopefully be better in the future. But
I don't even think you should expect to get like the fall off from Minkah to like whoever you'd be signing as a random free agent corner is going to be, or safety is going to be far. Like you got to get a lot to, I don't know. I can't get on board with that idea.
It's interesting. I got to get this one more in here from Thomas. He brought up Minkah in this one. Steelers seem to believe in their legacy too much to trade icons such as TJ Watt, Cam Hayward. Those players seem to serve as tent poles for how people relate to the Steelers of old. Who else on the team are kind of the tent pole players that would be blasphemous to trade? Has Minkah reached that point?
No, I don't think Minkah's reached that point. I think always, I don't think there's anybody that's blasphemous to trade if the player wants it. Like, I think anybody that came to the Steelers, like if TJ came to the Steelers and was like, hey, look, this isn't working. We have 1 year left on the deal. I think I'd rather play it out somewhere else. I'm from Wisconsin, really want to go back and play for the Packers. I think the Steelers would facilitate that. I don't think there's anybody they wouldn't trade, but I think there are players that they wouldn't trade unless they wanted to be traded. And I think TJ and Cam are probably the two guys on the roster right now that fit that bill. I think they would consider trading Minkah if they thought it was a good deal for the team. I don't think they would like say, no, we can't trade this guy. But I have a hard time seeing a deal that looks good for them right now.
So is it just those two then in your mind right now? TJ and Cam?
Yeah. For you, is there anybody? I got nobody else.
I don't think so. No. I mean, like with you're never really going to trade. Like Zach Frazier wouldn't be traded right now.
Well, yeah, you're not going to trade like guys on rookie contracts that are playing well.
Yeah,
that's like Joey Porter. Yeah, like whatever. But yeah, I mean, yeah, I like just in terms of like this guy means too much to our franchise to trade. Yeah, TJ, Cam, nobody else. And honestly, like the Steelers are a pretty. I don't want to say cutthroat is the right word, but like I think people think that they like love their history and tradition. Like they forced Troy Polamalu to retire. They forced Hines Ward to retire. In fact, they had to cut Hines Ward because he wouldn't retire, and then he eventually did retire. They didn't re-sign Rod Woodson. Like they let him go to free agency. They didn't believe
he actually brought up Rod Woodson within this comment too.
Like they let Greg Lloyd walk. They let Kevin Green walk. Like they're. That's not their person. I think people think that's their personality, but I don't think it is.
Yeah. All right. Good stuff.
It sure looks like they forced Ben out. Like,
well, yeah. I mean, he certainly has made it seem that way, that he would have continued to play.
No one's come out and said so, but it sure looks like it, right?
Yeah. Yep. All right. Good stuff. We will continue the conversation tomorrow with plenty more questions, so keep those coming in.
Good questions. I'm psyched about the questions we have.
Alan, until that, tell the people they can find you.
Saunders_PGH on X, Instagram, TikTok, and Blue Sky. PGH Steelers Now sites account, SteelersNow.com. Go there and read the words so that I can get paid. And sign up for SN Plus. I think the promo code Allentown is still working. We're going to come up with a new one here shortly, though. And like, subscribe, hit the bell for notifications here on the YouTube channel. 15K, baby. And climbing. And
15...
climbing.
Oh, we brought up DeMonte KZ. We're at 15,023. So fitting to bring him up. Who's another number 23?
Jason Simmons, current Washington Commanders secondary coach. Joe Hayden.
Joe Hayden.
Mike Wagner.
I was trying to think like obscure. Yeah, that's why.
Tyrone Carter.
Yep.
Super Bowl champion.
There we go. That's the one I was looking for.
Of them.
Yep. That's the one I was looking for. All right. Anyways, keep that climb going. Also, leave us a 5-star review and subscribe if you're listening somewhere else. Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcast from, you'll find us there. Just search Steelers Afternoon Drive. Then you'll find me everywhere. Zachary Smith, PGH, for Alan Saunders and myself. Thanks for jumping in. Take another ride on the Steelers Afternoon Drive.